America's Coaching Supervision Network on April the 19th. And this is a precursor to it. So you get a little flavor of how he works, and what systemic coaching and constellations is anyways. What the heck is that all about? What I appreciate is the systemic nature of the work, the somatic nature, and the intuitive work that happens in this space. I don't think we have much to say than that, John. Let's get into the session, shall we? Thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you. And this is 1 hour, yes? So, good. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me, and welcome everybody. It's lovely to see people from all over the world. Oh, I can only see myself now. That's very disconcerting.
You can change it. You can change that if you want to see everybody. You can choose
okay,
in the top, and for everybody too.
It's in speaker view, is it? Okay, yeah. I'd rather be able to see you. Really. Lovely. That's better. Thanks. Yeah. So I'm a coach, and I'm a coach supervisor, and I'm really interested in all of the ways that we can be effective coaches and coach supervisors. I think I got kind of drawn towards systemic coaching 20 years ago, actually, in its original form in family constellations, when I was looking to resolve something in my own inner system and my relationship with my family of origin, because this work is rooted in the work of Bert Hellinger, who was a family system therapist. And I was also training as a coach at the same time. And so that was pure luck, really. I was able to begin to put the two things together in my mind, bringing understanding of how human systems work in a family and at a multi-generational level into my coaching. I thought would be fascinating, and I spent the next 20 years trying to work out how to do that. And while I'm kind of working it out, which, as Lily says, is a mixture of an intuitive and a somatic process, I've been sharing what I've been learning along the way, really, and wrote a book about it, and that's just came out in its 3rd edition in 2020, 3rd and final edition, I should say. So I won't be writing another one if I can help it. Sometimes I can't. So I've started publishing articles on LinkedIn and various other places. So it seems I have to write in order to understand things. So. And yeah, so I'm going to offer you a quick overview of the work in the context of coaching. As it said in the email invitation from Lily, what I'm doing today is to give you an overview of systemic coaching. Some of you will be very familiar with that already, and some of you, it may be completely new. I hope it's equally useful for both kinds of perspectives. In my experience of this work, you can revisit it and revisit it and revisit it, and something fresh comes up every time. It's very rich and generous work, and it's just a pleasure to share. So I'm going to, because we've got limited time, I'm going to use some PowerPoint slides just to try and communicate the key aspects of the work I'd love to share with you today. I'm going to give you an opportunity to have a little bit of experience of it, I hope. And also time towards the end for questions. There may also be some answers, but questions are the main thing. So what I'm going to share with you, and please do just interrupt, turn your microphone on if there's a pressing question that you haven't understood, you're feeling stuck and you want me to slow down or stop for a while and answer a question, feel free. So what I'm going to attempt to do in the next 20 minutes probably is give you an overview of what is described in detail in the book, and that you are best placed to learn experientially in a training environment or workshop. And the first thing I want to talk about is systems, and what does the phrase systemic in this context mean, because there are lots of different interpretations. And then talk about the visual aspects of visual mapping and constellations, and give you some examples of those, and also give you a short experience that you can all do something where you are right now, sitting in your chair. And then if we have time at the end, although this is really what I'm going to be talking about on April the 19th, is talk about how the stance, principles and practices of systemic coaching, which is a kind of supervision, can be used in coaching supervision, because I think it offers something that's a little bit different to other ways of working. Not better than, just different in that it's accessing a different level and kind of information. So I will keep rattling on until you ask a question or interrupt in some way. Please feel free. Lots of people use the words system and systemic in different ways. Lots of people in the coaching community teach and facilitate around these words in completely different ways. Very common understanding of the word systemic is that it means team coaching. And indeed, this form of systemic coaching does include teams, but it isn't limited to just teams. It's all interrelationships, whether it's your inner relationship with yourself, your inner constellation, your relationship with one other, your relationship with a team, your relationship with the whole organization, the field of the whole organization, or the wider fields and larger forces that organizations and social systems are nested within. So systemic in the way that I am describing it today is an applied philosophy that you can apply in any number of contexts. And if you're interested in systems, then the first system to be interested in is your own physical neurobiological system. And the system of the self is the place that you are invited to return to throughout my book and the trainings that we facilitate. And this will be familiar to you territory, I'm sure, but this idea of us having three centers of intelligence: the head, the heart, the gut, or ara, the body, let's say, the body mind, the heart mind, the head mind. Much of the work of systemic coaching is about bringing systems into coherence and flow, and that has to start with ourselves. It's an ongoing journey, which is why I'm still on the journey 20 years after coming across it. Why anyone that is seriously interested in coaching or supervision will already know that it invites us into a lifelong journey, primarily a lifelong journey in relationship to ourselves, our inner constellation. And I think that stands up under scrutiny. I just wanted to share this one quote today. You'll be familiar with it from Eugene Gendlin. The body is the unconscious. So this work is about surfacing the unconscious that's held in the body of the client or the supervisee, depending on your professional role, into an external visible map, so that the client and you get to see what's going on within the system of the self, but also the system of the organization that they're working in. And this is why there's a peacock's tail feathers on the front of my book, and we use it as a metaphor throughout the trainings. The invitation is to imagine all of the relational fields, all the systems in which you've belonged behind you, like a peacock's tail. And even as you hear me saying that, as you sit there with your feet on the floor and grounded in your chair, you might just begin to notice what systems come up behind you that you come from, that you have belonged in. Professional systems, educational systems, family systems. How each of these impact the way that you work and show up in your life and your professional role. I like to think of it as looking at all my belongings. So we start off how we're looking at how we belong in and with ourselves, and then begin to recognize that we belonged. We were born into a system, family system. We belong in that family system, however difficult it may be to find our place, our safe place, our voice, or our authority. We came from a family system, and the deepest patterns emerge from our belonging in our family system. That family system is nested within a social system or multiple social systems, depending on the history of your family. And then as we grow up from little children to slightly bigger children, we start going to school and educational systems, where we may begin to notice that the rules of belonging are different to our family system or social system, or some are the same and some are different. So all the time as we travel through these systems, we're creating an inner constellation, a patchwork of relationships and interdependencies, loyalties, hidden dynamics, deep patterns. I expect you can remember the first organizational system you belonged in, you joined, when you were paid for all your hard work instead of just having to do it at school. And as you travel through different organizational systems, you will have had different experiences of belonging in each. In some, you would have found your place of belonging easily. In others, much more difficult. And perhaps you experienced traumas like mergers and acquisitions, or sudden endings, and the system began to feel less safe, more fractured, more complex. And 20 years later, you had the brilliant idea to leave organizational life, be independent, become a coach, and then perhaps a supervisor. Somebody who can look back on their organizational belonging and help others find their safe place in systems. And I think that dynamic underpins many coaches and coach supervisors, that we're trying to resolve something that we've seen in organizational systems, that we experienced, we saw others experience. And this journey that we go through is all held within larger fields of belonging and human needs, dynamics. And the primary dynamic that we're exploring when you bring belonging into the heart of your work and the way of looking at the world is this cycle of joining, belonging, and leaving systems. And I think leaving is the least well attended to dynamic, or part of the cycle of joining, belonging, leaving in organizational life. In fact, you could say in life in general, but thinking of the professional systems for the purposes of this morning. And that many people who become coaches have had very difficult leavings in the past. In fact, as I say, it's often one of the reasons people become coaches. And so we attract in the peacock tail feathers of our clients, if you like, the same patterns we have experienced ourselves until we're more conscious and aware of them. So this method that I'm just beginning to share with you is also very useful self-supervision. The other thing to be aware of at this stage is what's going on in the system. The system is resourced to be in coherence and flow itself by paying attention to these three principles, and I'll say a little bit more about these later: time, place, and exchange. When we pay attention to all that, it can create health and flow in the systems. That's what this work is in service of. So coming back down to the individual, and this is in the book, I think, and so runs right through the trainings, is to begin to think of yourself, whether you're a coach or a coach supervisor, or in fact, in any professional role, to think of yourself as a system and to build a awareness as you travel through your life of the systems of belonging that you have come from behind you. And that is a systemic perspective. So, as I say, it's not about the word systemic in this context doesn't mean to say we're talking about teams. We're thinking about ourselves and our place in the world from a systemic perspective. And just to go a little bit further into what that means, we're looking specifically at 4 things: hidden loyalties, the systems in which we have belonged. Belonging is the deepest human need. So from that emerge loyalties to systems in which we belong. Those loyalties can hold us back or set us free. This work allows us to see them more clearly and to use them as resources. The second thing is hidden dynamics. Dynamics in systems that we experience, our interaction with them, and then also hidden resources. And finally, deep patterns. And hidden resources is something I'm going to come to in about 10 minutes when I invite you into an exercise. Because I think our job as coaches, coach supervisors, is to make sure that we're frequently resourced by our often hidden resources, resources that we've forgotten about or not really seen. So this is the invitation as you become a systemically orientated coach. And as I say, this will be familiar to many of you, I'm sure, is to imagine all the systems in which your client has belonged behind them and to hold them in that larger frame of thinking and seeing and being, so that we move from, and here I'm talking about individual coaching, where the person on the left here is the coach, this is the client, although this also applies to teams. The difference between coaching and systemic coaching is we're holding the client in a larger field of view and imagining and inviting to surface some of the hidden loyalties, deep patterns, and resources behind our coachee. This, of course, is relevant to supervision as well. So the sorts of things that a systemic perspective might surface as you're there with your coaching client, coming back very, very briefly to these 3 principles. The first is the principle of time. Who and what came before creates a systemic hierarchy. Short example of that: a leader struggling to occupy their role authority, a new leader struggling to occupy their role authority. And you might do all sorts of very useful things with them, say person-centered coach, or using any one of the valuable and useful other coaching methodologies. From a systemic perspective, though, the first question would be who belonged in this role before you and how did they leave? So in other words, we're interested in the field, the energy field that this person struggling to find their authority is trying to occupy. And if all of the other questions and methods have not surfaced why the struggle is ongoing, then it's very likely to be a systemic dynamic. And the most common is that the person who occupied the role before didn't leave well, and so it becomes impossible to occupy the role cleanly, and the pattern simply repeats. The principle of place, the second principle of healthy systems. Systems will always remember who or what's been excluded. In other words, the more you try and push something away, not talk about the people we laid off last year, don't worry, there was only 600 of them, or whatever the language and pattern of the organizational system is. Systems will recruit current members in order to demonstrate and show that there's a problem that hasn't been resolved, usually, if not always, in the past. So who or what is excluded, the system will remember. These are just the sorts of things that show up in constellations, which we'll come to in a second. And finally, the balance of giving and take. This is what the balance, this is what exchange means. And I don't know, the example that comes to mind as I'm sitting here this morning, is that this is something I notice in coaches as well as in organizations. Very often there can be too much giving, not enough resourcing for coaches and coaching supervisors. The tail feathers behind that pattern obviously go back usually a long way. But the root of burnout in organizations and in coaches and coaching, I think, is to do with this balance of exchange and taking care of it. Because when you take care of these three principles, you create the conditions for flow and health to emerge. How are we doing for time? All right. So this work invites us to move from a linear perspective to a systemic perspective. A systemic perspective is, on the face of it, more complex, but it's actually more true. That's the main difference. And as a systemic coach or supervisor, we have to be able to tolerate both hierarchies, hierarchy of the organizational chart and the hierarchy of the system. And then we have to be able to work with systems that are actually also on the move, because of course, organizational systems aren't a static entity like this video has become. These birds normally flocking. It's probably run out of computing processing power. But imagine these birds were flying across your screen, and this is really what organizational life is like, isn't it? That things are moving at such speed and so dynamically that it's very hard for people in organizations to deal with the level of complexity that a system really is, whilst it's also moving. And so what we need to be able to do, as it were, is to zoom in to different parts of the system and be able to take a snapshot, if you like, of particular areas that the client is involved in, entangled with, or responsible for. And that's really what a constellation is. It's about looking at patterns. I've always loved this quote by Fritjof Capra. Patterns cannot be weighed or measured. Patterns must be mapped. And a constellation, the beginning of a constellation at least, is a visual map of patterns. The map is created by the client you're with, or the supervisee you're with. And what you then do to facilitate that map, which clearly requires training and experience, is the facilitation is called the constellation. This second quote, I also always loved. Many of the problems faced by today's organizations, social structures, and individuals exist as inner images. The purpose of a visual map made with physical objects, as you can see in this picture, is to surface what's unconscious in the client, but also in the system that they occupy, and to make it conscious and visible so that you can then begin to test it, explore it, get within it, come alongside it. One of the differences of this way of working is it's the difference between talking about an issue and actually physically being with it. And you learn to do this in the room with other human beings, not as it's shown here in its application in one-to-one settings with physical objects. And it's an extraordinary process, as to use Lily's word earlier. It's two words, embodied and intuitive, really comes to life. I just want to show you a couple of examples before we get into an exercise. And this first one is CEO mapping dynamics just before the merger. So she was exploring the system that they were merging with, the system was one that she was leading. And just this visual map, the proximity and distance between the mats, the fact that they were both pointing the same way, which is unusual, I must say, to discover. It turned out to be one of those rare occasions where it really was a merger, not an acquisition. And it really did work, and there was similar dynamics and patterns and respect in both systems. But to see that and to talk about it are two very different things. This is a female CEO I was working with several years ago. This is before the pandemic. It's on the tabletop there, exploring why she was struggling to find her role authority. This is a representative for her and operational director. And in the conversation we had, one thing wasn't mentioned, which as soon as she mapped it was mentioned, which was the former CEO who'd served in this role for 17 years, also a woman, and also with strong ties and loyalties to the other board members. When she saw this, this changed everything. This is early on in the mapping. Later on, she brought her representative over to hear, faced the former chief executive, and I gave her some words to try out to find a respectful way of honouring what had come first. The system was trying to remember her because she'd left in a difficult way. This is a founder I worked with some years ago, exploring a burnout dynamic that he suffered from. And I'm going to be very respectful of his privacy and also the time we've got. I'll tell you very little about this, except that he found another burnout, in fact, the death of an older sibling of his, his parents only just told him about, in his family of origin. So staying loyal to the missing child, he repeated this burnout pattern in his life and his work. It's now healthy and successful, I'm pleased to say. I think this is the last example. I was working with a sales director of a retail company who kept getting caught in between two founders in their arguments. So I asked her to map out the previous organizational system she had been in and the one before that. And you could see the same pattern everywhere. It won't probably surprise you to discover that she realized this triangulation started in the family of origin. She got caught between her parents. Now, you may be wondering, oh, wait a minute, is this therapy? No, not at all. This is seeing patterns. I helped her find a therapist that she could then go and work with. And she brought the insights and peace that emerged from that process back into the coaching and became even more successful. In fact, she left this company. It's now running her own. So even though some of these examples include family, that's, again, something we teach on the trainings. It's not that you're trying to do quasi-therapy. The client is in control of this process. The client is doing the mapping. Only go as far as they're comfortable. This process also is very useful with teams. Here I was working with a team in the finance sector. They were mapping their relative place. This is them here in relationship to other teams in the bank. And they were trying to find out why they were losing their voice. No one seemed to be paying them any attention. So at the end of the mapping process, I invited them to place an arrow to indicate the direction of the attention of the other senior teams, directorates in this big bank. And as you can see from the arrows, none of them were looking at them. So the rest of the two-day workshop, we explored why that was and managed to find out what was hidden in the system. This way of working, as I say, is best experienced first, at least in the body, actually standing in workshops. This is an example within a business school environment where I was facilitating a team leader to explore both individually, one-to-one, first of all, and then physically with representatives. So these people are not his team. They're people who know nothing about him or his team, or even what company he's from. They were actually all from Finland, and this is in England. He's English. And so, yet the process works beautifully. I would say almost self-works beautifully. And as a facilitator, you have to get used to surrendering your ego authority, knowing what to do next, or quite what's going on, because the field of the system emerges in the people in the room. So it's an extraordinary process. During the pandemic, we also found out that it works beautifully online. And I'll give an expanded demonstration of this at the conference on April the 19th. I've got 3.5 hours we've got this morning. So I want to give you an experience of the approach, but first of all, just to see if there are any pressing questions or confusions, because I am going rather fast. Do love a bit of silence. Okay.
Paulette, I saw
Yes.
you had your hand up. Did you have a question? No? Meryl? You good?
It's beyond words. I think this is actually, joking aside, this is what I love about the work. I'd really invite you to trust what's going on in your body right now. Is this resonating? It's useful for you. What's happening to your breathing? Do you notice your attention wander, or is this what's going on for you? Just to notice that, everything about your embodied somatic experience. So I'm going to just to give you a little demonstration so that what I'm inviting you to do is clear. I'm going to give you a demonstration on it's called the Jam board. It's a whiteboard which we use for the online trainings. So this is a picture that you saw earlier. I'm just going to push that to one side. Don't need that at the moment. And this is a whiteboard. I'm sure you're familiar with lots of different kinds. This is one that we've kind of created. The contents of which we've created. My invitation to you is to, if you're a supervisor of a coach and a coachee, or a supervisor of a coach, is to start to tune in just now as I'm talking about a particular relationship between you and a coach who you supervise that is somehow feels a bit stuck, or you're stuck in the parallel process or some sort of counter-transference. You find yourself either feeling as stuck as the coach is, which is why they came to supervision, their relationship with their coachee held in this field. Or you have a completely different kind of stuckness. You're not sure where it's coming from. And this is an opportunity to find your relative place and relative size in relationship to this field. I'm demonstrating on a whiteboard. You're going to be doing this physically with objects. So I'm going to invite you now to think of an issue that you're facing with a coach that you're supervising. And if you're not a supervisor, then think of a client that you're working with where you feel in some way stuck, you can't find your authority, or you feel lose all your sense of presence or skills or knowledge when you're with them. We all have those strange, there's something in the field between us, we can't quite work out what it is. So we go to a supervisor. Sometimes the supervisor doesn't know either. And that's all information rather than a right or a wrong thing. So I invite you all just to think of somebody that you're working with in either one of those ways. And have a look around your desk wherever you're sitting and choose something to represent them. Something small like this. This is a Tipex bottle. Or eye drops, something like that, whatever is around your desk. And I just invite you to set them up in relationship to each other. And here I want you to really slow down and go into your body and your breath. Make sure you're really focusing in on one particular relational field that you're either the supervisor of or the coach. Really allow yourself to kind of drift off out of your head and into your body, and see if you can place the representatives for the people that you have decided to focus on, including yourself, importantly. Just so that it feels true, not right or wrong or how you wish it was or think it ought to be if I could see or any of that. Just noticing proximity, so relative distance, relative direction of attention. That's easy to see here, but if you're using a Tipex bottle, make sure you know that the front of it is the face, as it were. It's which way you're facing. And the invitation is to set up a map of the relational field that you're interested in this morning, just as it is, at its most difficult, if you like, rather than trying to come up with the answer in your head. Now here I can play with relative size as well as direction. You can find creative ways of doing that. You're interested in where is everybody's attention, without being able to make necessarily rational sense. You don't have to explain it to anybody, least of all yourself. Just follow your intuition and your embodied sense of where you are and where the others are. Then, when it feels familiarly stuck, I'm not sure if that's a word, bring in another representative object for a resource. If you're the supervisor, resource for you, something or somebody that somehow brings you strength and clarity. Or if you're looking at a coachee relationship, bring in a resource behind you as the coach. Now you may know as soon as you choose the object what that resource is. It could be a skill, a presence, a body practice, a spiritual practice, your values, your beliefs. It may be that you have no idea what it is, but you notice that as you bring it close, it resources you. What does resource you mean? It means you feel less entangled, or have your inner freedom, more clear about your place and voice. Hopefully, you've no idea what I'm talking about, but your body will, because your unconscious is really who I'm talking to, and you'll have some sense of a step to better when you bring in the resource. So I'm going to invite Lily or Mary or whoever's in charge here to pop you into breakout rooms to just have 5 minutes together. We haven't got very long, I'm afraid. Just what did you notice, or what sense are you making of this process anyway, if that's what you want to talk about, or what have you noticed about the map you've created? What's it like to map it rather than just talk about it?
Okay, I've got it ready. 10 minutes? Did you 5 minutes, you said?
Yeah.
5? Okay. 7. 7 it is. See you back in 7.
Thanks.
And Damien, you can choose any room you want. Room 7 has the least number of people. 7 or 9. No, 7.
Rooms don't seem to be going, Lily. Or at
Can't
least
see any
there we
rooms
go.
here.
Okay, thanks.
Ah, there they are. Mhm. Down the bottom.
Lynn, do you have a room?
Oh, microphone's muted, Lynn.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, I have to leave, but I so enjoyed this. Thank you very, very much. Give me
Thank
lots to think about. Yes.
You're welcome.
See ya.
Have a good day.
Bye. Thank you, you too.
I've just moved
Should we?
Lynn because her partner didn't join.
Your microphone.
Now there is one person only room 7, Lily. You may maybe move this person somewhere else.
I did already.
Okay. Okay,
Can we
so
stop the recording? A little
Yeah.
bit?
Is the recording paused?
give me a second.
Message from the person who's still here.
So
You
he
want to
said-
come on and talk to us?
Mm.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. I know it wasn't enough time. It never is. But we've got 10 minutes. So I've got 3 minutes things to say at the end, but I'd love to hear from you. What was useful, interesting, not useful, confusing?
I used my mouse pad and few stickers, and I was just telling the girls that immediately sparked an idea of using murals in an online session and helping the client move the pieces, you know, like stick it notes and circles, and talk about the connections and,
Yes.
and where they are.
Good.
you.
Yeah. I think, it's really important to recognize that you're not doing the work here. You're holding the space. The invitation to map the pattern is an invitation which anybody can respond to, even if hopefully they don't really understand the question. So again, you're talking to their unconscious. And we have a way as a human being of just manifesting the relative distance, relative direction, and relative size without very much further instruction. So yeah. But read the book if you want to go a bit more further than that. Yes, Mel. Just put your microphone on if you want to say anything. Don't bother putting your hand up. We haven't got very long.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. What I appreciate about the map, and I drew a little map here, was that it gave visibility and more coherence to what intuitively I was feeling. Like I had thoughts and ideas, but now I could see it concretely, and that it was a replication of a family dynamic I was in, very clear. Now, what's different now for me is, as a young person, I didn't know how to resource myself. I didn't have allies. Here, I was like, oh, no, I know where I can go now. And so it came from this map. So
Yeah,
thank you.
Lovely. You're very welcome. Two things that come to me when you're talking, and this is an invitation to everybody afterwards, if you want to go a bit further, put bits of paper on the floor to represent your map, duplicate it and stand in them in your place and then all the other places to see what you pick up. And then bring in the resource, again, on a piece of paper or an object or a chair or a cushion, and just allow yourself to absorb what's available from the resource, which is very often behind you or to your side. It could be a person like a grandparent, it could be a skill like being an NLP practitioner, it could be anything, it could be a pair of nice socks. It doesn't matter. Whatever resources you is what brings you strength and flow and coherence. And when you embody receiving that rather than just, as you say, talking about it, you're moving from a conversation to a constellation, which is what this work is all about. Thanks, Mel. Anybody else? Kim, you've got your microphone on. Nothing to say. Kristen?
It's
Your
really,
unconscious wants to say something.
I know, it's really powerful. And I actually, just from the speaking of, sorry, I didn't see what her name was, I realized, oh my God, yes, that's my family of origin dynamic. I hadn't seen it until she said it.
One
Yeah.
thing's for sure about the human condition, apart from death and taxes, is we spend our life trying not to replicate our family of origin and then do exactly that, because that's the principle of place. Whatever you exclude, you attract.
Yes.
System will always remember whatever you're trying to keep away from.
Yeah.
So when you turn and face it and integrate its strengths and its dynamics and its deep patterns, and that's of course, you know, not an easy thing to do, but it's a wonderfully resourcing thing to do.
Yeah.
What else are you going to do with the rest of your life anyway? Then, you know, life can change, and you can also be a much more effective coach from a distance.
John, I'm just realizing as you said that, as I look at my mapping and I see the same thing in my family of origin, if I now make a decision to move my place, it changes everything for me.
Yes, lovely. And that movement probably becomes possible when you turn and face your resources.
Absolutely.
And, please resource me.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. I've just posted something in the chat. It's an article I wrote on LinkedIn a few weeks ago about what everyone's talking about, which is this, I would describe it as the shift from being helpful to being useful. And that pattern, of course, it comes from the family of origin usually. Yeah, what else did you discover or enjoy?
I can, oh, sorry.
No, Lori, go.
That all four of us in the room, when we looked at our four scenarios, could all see the patterns and threads through the same scenario, all different scenarios, but the same patterns. So I thought that was pretty interesting around the system of being a coach or supervisor, or people attracted to these types of sessions.
Why do you think you're a coach? Yeah. And what was the pattern, without giving away any confidentialities?
That when you took a few different perspectives, there was a lot of simplicity. It didn't need a lot of pieces to be clear.
Yes.
And that probably we make bigger deals out of something because of those unconscious patterns than we need to.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
So I would add something to this. Two things helped me with my map. One, when I took the picture from the top and I looked at the picture of this map, it gave me some kind of insight, but as well an observer. So participants in my group who noticed something I haven't noticed. So this, it's almost like, of course, there is a map and the person who creates it makes sense out of it, but it is useful to incorporate this many different perspectives somehow. But the last element, which I always surprises me, I was at your training, I read your book, I reread your book in English and in Polish and so on, and I always forget about the third principle. I remember about time, I remember about the place, but somehow balance of give and take, it's like escapes me. When you said it today, I was like, oh my God, I forgot about it again. So I wonder how can I incorporate in my work more somehow.
Yeah, that's why in this tiny taster, as it were, I'm focusing on resources, because so many coaches embody that patterning. I thank you for saying that. Giving too much, becoming too helpful, and then burning out trying to be a good coach instead of burning out in an organization, getting exhausted because they think it's about being helpful. But of course, you know where you learned that. It's a survival strategy in your family of origin. So listen, we've sort of, in one way, we've just got started, another way, we've got finished. So it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon here, 9 o'clock in the morning there. It's been a pleasure to meet you all. I'm happy to stay for another 10-15 minutes for those that have pressing questions, but I'll hand back to Lily now with thanks, and see you on April the 19th, those of you who are coming to the conference. We'll have a bit longer.
Well, thank you, John. That was quite provocative for some of us, I imagine. Really grateful for your time. Thank you for giving us that quick, brief hit. Looks like people are heading over to buy your book now, and hopefully we'll get some more people curious enough to come to the conference. So John will be doing a half-day workshop at the virtual conference, and I put the link in the chat if you're curious about what he's up to. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you at the conference, hopefully. Damien, anything you want to say?
No, remember everybody about the conference, and Inga is going to be doing a session next week for the Asian Supervisor Network. So Inga, do you want to say briefly what it is, if people are available and wanted to join?
Yes, I will be doing the session because work with John was so influential that then after I did the training with him, I actually got deeper into constellation and psychodrama as the mother of constellation work. And psychodrama is something which is close to my heart nowadays. And I will be exploring psychometric as the element of Moreno's work in this session, how we can take advantage of psychometric in the group supervision. So if you're interested, I would love to see you there as well.
If you don't have information, send us an email and I will send it to you. By the way, for the new people here, if you want to receive the ACSN newsletter, you don't receive it. Also, you want to post right now your email in the chat box so we can add your name to our list to be sure that every month you receive the invitation for these meetings. But we are always using the same Zoom ID, at the same time, the same day. So, John, thank you again.
You're very welcome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Any questions for John before we sign off? Their heads are full, John.
I'll speak slower at the conference, I promise.
Okay.
We'll go about half the speed.
Well, you'll have way more time, so thank you for that. We'll see you all at the conference then, if not the next session in May.
Great. Maria's got a question.
Lily, just before
Marie.
you go, do you have times when John is facilitating his half-day workshop is it on the website and timings?
Yes, it's the morning hour Pacific time.
Okay.
Where are you these days? Are you in the UK or in Australia?
No, I'm in the UK.
Yeah, so it'll be your evening.
Okay. On the 19th.
The 19th, yes. It's a 3.5-hour session.
Fantastic. Thank you. Look
Right.
forward.
Likewise. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.